just so glad Peter didn't introduce me as the state tax collector. But Peter, thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for your history of helping out elected officials and Democrats and being a great citizen of the state of Maryland. Please give Peter Perini a round of applause. So, I wonder if I could get Mr. Wiggins to come up. Yeah, today is the 75th anniversary of D-Day. So my dad is 97 and he's still with us. He's down in Montgomery County in a retirement home. And I tell Mike Miller, be careful, my dad's 97 and I'm not term limited. So I could be around for a while. But I had the privilege of serving in the U.S. Army back in the Vietnam era. And I just want to make sure that Mr. Wiggins knows that we appreciate folks that have been in the armed services, and specifically him. I put an article in the Frederick paper today about my dad and the fact that he would be appalled if I were praising him because he is so humble. But he was a B-24 bomber pilot in World War II in the Pacific. And I said, Dad, what did you think about D-Day? He said, actually, we didn't pay much attention to it because we thought they were going to invade Europe and take care of all that and then come and help us because we were preparing for something even bigger. And it didn't work out that way, obviously. But anyway, if you see a World War II vet, please give them a pat on the back. And I'd like to give Mr. Wiggins one of my much coveted Comptroller medallions. It's a challenge for him. Thank you for your service.
I served in Vietnam in 1968, and I stupidly volunteered for it, not realizing it was political more than a justifiable war. I came back and marched against the war, and that's all I have to say about that, except for, we should avoid a president that seems, to have the power to do whatever the hell he wants. That's terrible. And let's get rid of him. Thank you.
This is an absolutely true story. I've never told it in public before, but I was drafted. I wasn't a volunteer because I was a clueless college student who dropped out to work for Gene McCarthy. Remember that campaign in 1968? It's Clean for Gene, and I loved that. I had a great time until I got my draft notice. And I said, Mom, what's this? And she said, well, we were trying to tell you, you drop out of college, you're going to be eligible for the draft. So I headed off to Fort Jackson basic training, and then I headed to Fort Hood, and I just was sparked by what Mr. Wiggins said. Texas, to me, was so completely odd and unacceptable place for me from New England back then that I remember going and saying, I'm going to volunteer to go to Vietnam. There weren't that many people volunteering to go. I never ended up because I didn't have enough time in my service left to go over there. But I remember telling folks that you think Vietnam's bad, Texas wasn't much better. But that's okay. I don't mean to. I'm not running nationally for anything. But I would like to thank each of you for coming out and everybody for their citizen involvement. I happen to think that Maryland's a great state. I think we've got a great future. And I speak, well, that I wouldn't go that far, but I'm grateful for the honor and the privilege of being the Comptroller. And I'll just very briefly state that one of the things I care deeply about is the craft beer sector. This is a $800 million, approaching $1 billion of economic activity. These are family-owned businesses owned by Marylanders. They employ Marylanders. They use Maryland agricultural products to produce their beer. The beer is spectacular. Every glass of Maryland-produced craft beer produces 2.5 times the economic benefit to the state that an out-of-state bottle of beer does. So just from a fiscal standpoint, we should be encouraging our craft brewers and helping them grow. In fact, I was down at the Hoffman Meat Market before coming up here. And they also said, you know, if you could just clear up the state's procurement laws where we would be allowed to bid for producing meat products for K through 12 schools and the higher ed schools and the prisons, and not prohibited because of your crazy procurement rules, we could get a share of the $750 million of meat that's sold annually. In Maryland, right now, all we can do is the retail. So we're going to go back and put our pencils to paper and come up with a solution for not just Maryland-based alcohol products, but Maryland-based meat products, in fact, Maryland-based any products. And I'm announcing tonight the start of a Maryland patriotic movement funded by Marylanders, paid for by Marylanders, supporting great products produced by Marylanders, and it's going to be shop Maryland products and boost the economy, help your neighbors, employ our friends and our family members, and let's understand the economics of purchasing locally, because it's just unbelievable. It's like compound interest that not a whole lot of people understand, but works miracles. So stay tuned for the Shop Local, made in Maryland. And we're all started here with craft beer. So, and let me just conclude by saying, Peter very nicely mentioned the number of times I've visited out in Western Maryland. I do that because I want people to be able to touch a statewide elected official and either out of frustration or out of sympathy or whatever, communicate whatever it is that they want. I've made over 8,000 visits to small businesses over the last 12 years. And I think it has a very positive impact on the folks that I visit. Give a pat on the back from the state, indicate that if they have problems, particularly anything concerning my agency, that we're going to do our job and try to be good at customer service. So I'm going to continue doing that for the next 3 years. I'm going to show up, I'm going to do my job, I'm going to be a fiscal moderate. I've laid down the partisan sword. I've put the state of Maryland above my own party, much as I love the Democratic Party. I do not love the partisanship that we see very often displayed, and I think during the off-season we need to let go. Thank you. But I'm also going to focus on a new target, which is to make sure that elected officials, whatever party they belong to, are in politics for the right reason. And they have the kind of integrity that produces trust and confidence among our citizens. And you read about Baltimore, you read about Annapolis. Trust me, I think there's a lot of activity behind closed doors that would appall us, whatever party we belong to and whatever ideology it is. So reforming the system itself of selecting our elected officials in the state is something that I'm going to spend a lot of time suggesting we look at very closely. And that means independent redistricting, and I don't mean studying it, I mean doing it in a way where, in fact, the congressional and legislative districts make common sense and people can understand exactly who represents them. Getting rid of political slates in the primaries. There's no reason why some political boss should be able to put their thumb on the scale and pick who the candidates are going to be. Particularly someone like my good friend Mike Miller, who, is a very powerful individual, but absolute power corrupts absolutely, and particularly when you have complete and total power for many, many decades. So also allowing unenrolled or independents, as they're called, to vote in our party's primary. Why wouldn't we do that? These are young people generally. They don't like the fiscal reputation of the Democrats, but they like us on social issues and cultural issues. Let's bring them in, get them to help us. They're mobile, they're very portable, these young millennials, as they're called. They're people we need to actively recruit as a party. So, let me just thank each of you for coming. I'm happy to stick around, take any questions. If you have a problem with your taxes, I've got Alex here. I wanted to just introduce and give a shout out to the chair of the Democratic Central Committee, Randy Barber, who used to live next door to me down in the People's Republic of Tacoma Park. I still live there, and Randy, though, was a dear friend many, many years ago, and I'm delighted that he's doing well up here in Washington County. And for each of you, once again, let me just give you a personal note of appreciation. It makes me feel hopeful for the future to stand here with each of you. It just makes me feel good. Hagerstown's such a great spot. The Discovery, what is it called? Station. I mean, what an unbelievable thing that is. What was the name of the executive director?
Brittany Way.
Brittany, yeah, okay. So, trust me, there's some state money that's going to flow up to that institution. Yeah. And since a lot of you are Democrats, if you know Peter Perini, you're probably a Democrat. I'd like to just have Randy Barber say a word to everybody on behalf of the party.
Well, thank you, Peter. Best thing I can say, or the most important thing I can say, is that kids more or less grow up together. Hopefully most of you are Democrats. We know we've got a couple folks who are on the fence or whatever. But we are working hard.
Brett is a Democrat wannabe. Yeah.
We are unimportant.
Non-partisan.
And I respect that. No, we are working hard to create a stronger, more vibrant Democratic Party in this county. We are doing everything from soliciting opinions of people through a series of volunteer-led polls that we're going to start probably in about a month. We are also hosting a debate party at Flying Camel on the 26th and 27th of this month, where we can watch all of the Democratic candidates have a discussion, and we can also drown our sorrows in the process. And beyond that, we are working on any number of things. We would welcome your participation. We've got about 40 strong volunteers. We could easily figure out how to put another 40 to work. And I would really welcome it. If any of you want my card, come on over, I'll give it to you. Thank you. Thank you.
And Peter, you want to come up and finish up? Peter Perini is a dear friend of mine and someone that I hope to take advantage of because he's got a little bit of free time. And I want to make sure that I'm plugged in very closely with Peter.